All right, y'all. Welcome back to Common Arms channel. So today we're doing another little story time, and this is going to be about what it's like working on a nuclear submarine base. Now, of course, I'm not going to go into anything super crazy specific, just because then it gets into the more of like the sensitive side of being on the submarine base. But yeah, I'm gonna preface it by saying, what I had to do to actually get into a position to be on a nuclear submarine base, and then sort of what my job was and how everything actually was as I was sort of seeing it. So again, I joined the Marine Corps 2012, and then I went to infantry training battalion, and then after that I went to the basic security guard school in Chesapeake, Virginia. And you basically need to go through this basic security guard training before you go to the nuclear submarine base, because obviously you need like a little bit of specialized education on how to be a security guard, even though most of the stuff we learned at the schoolhouse didn't really apply. I think most of the stuff that we learned in the infantry training battalion applied more than it did the basic security guard training. So again, being a security guard for a nuclear submarine base is sort of like an extra job that you can go and do as an infantryman in the Marine Corps. So I did that, and it's about a 2-year assignment roughly. You might leave a little bit early or you might leave a little bit later, but it's roughly 2 years. So I got to the submarine base in 2013. So the nuclear submarine that I was on was in Kings Bay, Georgia, which is sort of like on the border of Georgia and Florida. So it's pretty awesome location. I'm not gonna lie, it was a really awesome location to be stationed at, especially just because it's away from all the big military installations, and it's also a Navy base, so the food was a lot better. I remember the chow hall was pretty good. The food was pretty good, and overall, it was just a pretty cool environment being so close to Florida. Because of course, we went down to Florida all the time. And yeah, of course, when you're new into the military, like I was, because I was a lance corporal. I was a freshly promoted lance corporal at the time. You don't really understand what's going on. You don't really understand how the military is like. And I think honestly, being a security guard on a submarine base is a good introduction to joining the military, because your main priority is going to be those submarines and the weapons and just basic security. So your schedule mainly revolves around a little bit of training, but mostly security. So it's not really too busy, and you don't really do too much training. So it's a good introduction to being into the or being in the military, just because you're not super busy and you're not super focused on doing this training, doing like a month-long training. I think the longest training we did was about maybe 2 or 3 days, the entire time I was there. So super easy introduction to the military. So that was kind of nice. It felt more like a civilian job, honestly. So it was, I would say overall it was fun, but it was also very boring. And then it was also very miserable. And that's sort of dependent on what I was doing at the time, because I started off being the nuclear security on the waterfront where the submarines are and everything. So I started off doing that, and then again I moved on to the recapture tactics team, which is like the CQB reactionary team on the nuclear submarine base. So I would say the guard element of being on the submarine base is definitely a lot worse, and the schedule is a lot worse, and overall it's just pretty miserable. But I don't know, there's something cool about being on like a reactionary guard force. Like we were reactionary because we had like our Lenko Bearcats, which is sort of like a SWAT truck. We had these SWAT trucks all over, and they were operated by the Marines and the Navy, because the Navy also had Navy Master at Arms there to assist in security. And then we also had some Coast Guard personnel. And then you sort of do like a week in, week out schedule. So you'll do a week of doing the guard force, and then you'll come out for a week where you're just in garrison life. So that's how it was most of the time. But whenever you're doing the week of the guard force, you can't have your cell phone, you can't have any electronics. They do have some phones in the reactionary buildings, but it's just like a landline. So you don't really have any entertainment. And of course, when you're on post, you're definitely not going to have any entertainment, or you're not supposed to have any entertainment. So it's pretty much just you and your buddy just pulling security and trying to entertain each other for roughly 6 to 8 hours, depending on the schedule. Now, you will also rotate from the machine gun bunkers. So you'll be like on the machine gun bunker for about 8 hours, get off for 8 hours, and then go into the Bearcat for about 8 hours, and then get off for 8 hours. So it's a pretty miserable schedule, and you're doing a lot of security, and you don't really have time for anything else besides maybe the gym and maybe reading a book whenever you're off post. But yeah, you're still in the wire, so you're still on the guard force as a reactionary element for the rest of that week. But you're constantly rotating in and out of the post. And yeah, the machine gun bunker was pretty boring, and that's generally what people wanted to avoid as much as possible. But I thought it was kind of cool because, you have the waterfronts, and then you also have like the Navy doing their like patrolling on their boats, and then you also have these mammal boats, which are really cool because we basically had like weaponized sea lions and weaponized dolphins. So what would happen is the dolphins would be able to detect if there was like a swimmer or something crazy in the water. And this is all like unclassified, so it's totally fine for me to talk about it. But yeah, you had these dolphins that would be able to detect someone who's in the water, and they would sort of, I think they use like their sonar or something to actually let the mammal handlers know what was going on. And then you also have these sea lions to go in and attach this like clamp, almost like a handcuff kind of thing. They would clamp it to the diver's leg, and then the diver would get pulled out of the water. We never really had any instances like this, of course, because there's a lot of security, but we had those mammals, and it was really cool to just be on the machine gun bunker and just watching these dolphins, just swimming around. At night, they had like chem lights or some sort of like light on their back, so you would see this light just moving through the water. And then sometimes the mammal handlers would come by your post and start doing tricks with the dolphins, which is really, really cool. You don't really see the sea lions too much because, of course, when they're being used is when something bad is happening. But yeah, that was probably the coolest part about being on the machine gun bunker. And then being in the Bearcat was interesting. It was pretty fun just because it's not just you and one other person. It's you and 3 other people, I think. So you have like the driver, the vehicle like commander or the team leader. You have the machine gunner, and then I think you have 1 or 2 riflemen. So yeah, it's about 4 or 5 people. So it was kind of fun. It was a lot more fun being in the Bearcats, especially because again, it's like a SWAT truck. You get to just sit in the back and chill out. Now again, you are constantly rotating on the post and then going off the post, but whenever you go off the post, you're still like a reactionary element. So you'll go to like the reactionary building where everybody sleeps for that entire week, and that's where all your stuff is at. So whenever you get off post, you go in there. But, if there's like an alarm or something, if someone calls like an emergency or whatever it is, then everyone inside that reactionary building has to run to the, like, basically our garage where the other Bearcats were located. You'd have to run down to the garage. You'd have to throw all your gear on. So you'd like sort of stage your gear with your ammunition and everything. So you throw all your gear on, and then you are assigned a team and a vehicle. So you go into that specific vehicle. So it was kind of a pain in the butt. Sometimes you'd do it for training where you'd have to wake up at like 2 a.m, super groggy. There's a couple times I was in the shower and I had to react, and I was just like, all right, well, I'm going to throw on some underwear and some shorts, and then I'm going to run downstairs and throw on my body armor, because you never really know. Sometimes it's a drill, sometimes it's a false alarm, sometimes it is, an actual emergency. But yeah, nothing too crazy happened while I was there. But that was something in the back of your mind. So even though you were off post, you were just thinking about that, the constant threat of having to run downstairs and throw on all your body armor. And of course, you can imagine being on the border of Georgia and Florida, it was super hot. So whenever you go and throw on all your gear and react, then you're basically covered in sweat by the time you're done. Even if it was like a false alarm, you would be, covering down on everything for about 30 minutes to an hour just to make sure it wasn't anything crazy. So yeah, you're doing the post, you're doing the quick reaction, and you're sort of just rotating in and out. Now, being on post wasn't too bad, honestly. The food was very bad just because you had to get the food brought to you. The people in the reactionary building had their own like civilian cook. So, you can always go down, eat as much as you want, but the people on post have to get food from the people in the reactionary building. So you come off post, help the people out on post with their food, and then when you're on post, you get all this crappy food. So it's kind of funny, but being on post wasn't too bad. And a lot of weird, crazy stuff happened when you were on post. And, you'd expect these Marines who are guarding nuclear submarines to be like super disciplined, But at the end of the day, we were Marines, and we were infantry Marines especially, and we were also pretty young. Most of us were, under 22 years old. So yeah, you had some antics for sure. I remember there was one time, and this, if you love animals, then you might get triggered by this. But there was one time, there was one dude, I don't know where he was from, like Alabama or something. He's from the South. I knew that much. But there's one point he was in the Bearcat and he was sharpening this stick that he found on the ground at some point, and he was just sharpening it into a spear. And you sort of rotate in and out from being on the machine gun to sitting in the back of the SWAT truck. So it was his time to go into the machine gun. And of course he brought his spear. It was basically a spear at this point. He brought it up into the machine gun turret with him. And you have all these seagulls, you have these turkey vultures, you have all these animals because we are by the waterfront. But there was one time he had his tray of food in the turret with him, because that's normally what you would do. And the seagulls were coming because they just like eating all of our food. The seagull came over, and I don't know, I guess he got it in a certain position where it was just like chilling and eating some of the food. And he speared the seagull with this spear that he just made like an hour prior. He speared the seagull, and then he cut the head of the seagull off, smeared the blood on his face like a psychopath, and then he took the head of the seagull and put it on the antenna of the SWAT truck. And it was just, I was new to the reactionary force, and this was just absolutely bizarre. I was like, what? Like, these guys have been here for about 6 months and they're doing this sort of tribal stuff already. I was like, dude, this is crazy. I'm going to like lose my mind in 6 months, huh? So seeing that was very, very shocking. And of course, you have all these civilians that work on the submarine base as well, because they do the refit for the submarines and they do all this other maintenance and whatnot and administrative stuff. So you just have these civilians just watching this the entire time, and they're just like super confused. And then he takes his like bloody spear and starts shaking it in the air, doing these weird noises. And it was surprising that we never got in trouble. Honestly, I don't know what the civilians thought of us. The sailors definitely knew the Marines were a little bit, off the cuff and kind of crazy. But the civilians, I don't know if it was like entertainment for them or what, but they probably thought they probably thought very low of us, I guess is the way to put it. But yeah, there was some crazy stuff that happened like that all the time. And I don't know, it's kind of bad to say, but yeah, whenever you get bored like that and you're on post for like 8 hours, you just try and find entertainment. So you'll have people just with knives stabbing the inside of the SWAT truck, just being super bored. Sometimes we'll just go out and walk like on patrol just because we want to get out of the SWAT truck. I mean, I kind of felt like a badass just because I had the old M16 with the M203 and the jungle handguard. And yeah, it looked very cool. We had like an M249 saw as well. So we had some pretty solid weapons, and it was just cool to walk around this, nuclear submarine base, because you were the security dudes. You were like it. If something was happening, it was pretty much up to you and the sailors. But honestly, the sailors weren't really as equipped as we were. But yeah, it felt very cool, and it was cool to walk around like that. But again, I don't know what the civilians thought of us. But I can imagine they were pretty confident in our ability just because of how bored we were and how eager we were to do everything. Because whenever an alarm went off, we would, get our stuff on as soon as possible. You had basically like, 15 people inside the reactionary building. And within 2 minutes or something, you'd have them all down in the garage with all of their weapons and all of their equipment on, all of their ammunition, and they're leaving the garage. So you had people reacting very quickly. So we didn't take it seriously, or as seriously as we should have when we were on the post. But whenever we were like reacting to things, we definitely got our heads in gear. And I think the civilians were able to see that. But we reacted to a few things, honestly. I think that one time there was a sailor, he was like a Navy chief. He had a cell phone and somebody reported it. So we didn't really know what was going on until we actually all got all of our gear on and responded to this building. And then it's just some sailor, with his cell phone. So we're doing all this crazy infantry stuff. We're clearing out this massive building. Some people were taking the elevator. Some people were clearing out the stairs. and then we're trying to lock down the third floor of this building because you just had this sailor on the balcony making a phone call and somebody reported it. So it was pretty funny. We did a lot of pretty solid responses, and I think the sailors and the civilians were kind of shocked whenever they saw us actually get into gear. And there was one time, there was also so we have this like island. I think it's like a man-made island that's used to sort of obscure the installation. It's called Crab Island. But basically, we have this island that you can respond to because, you know, if there's like a kayaker or something on the water, you generally have to go to that island to get a little bit closer to the kayakers or the fishing boats, because it happened all the time. So you would have kayakers, fishers just get a little bit too close and a little bit too curious. So they'd try and look at the submarines, and we'd have to go over to the island and basically tell them to go away. But we would use the Navy patrol boats for that. So there was one time we were responding. We went to the pier, and the sailors gave us a ride over to the island. It was pretty short. It was probably about a 1 minute ride. But then we also have a Humvee on the island. And for some reason, none of us could drive it, or the Humvee was like broken. So we have to have all of our gear on, and we have to run. It must have been like a mile, honestly. It felt like a mile in our gear to get to the edge of the island to tell this kayaker to go away. But by the time we got over there, the kayaker was already leaving. So we're like, all right, well, we're super tired. Let's just head back. And I mean, it felt pretty badass to get like a Navy patrol boat to drop you off on the island, and then you're just running to go tell this kayaker to go away. But it was pretty fun. Honestly, the responses were exciting, to say the least, because whenever something was happening, we really got our heads in the gear. And I think that was the only thing that really made it exciting. Well, I guess besides the stories of the submarine base being haunted, because there's a lot of stories that you hear whenever you get to the installation itself. Like, this post is haunted, this machine gun bunker is haunted. So it's like, okay, you know, you're new and you hear all these stories, and it's not too encouraging, but it's kind of spooky at nights because you're always just like, you're seeing things because you're so sleep deprived. And I don't know, I saw things all the time, but I really don't think that place was haunted. It's cool. It keeps the place interesting, I guess, and it keeps you on your toes whenever it's like 3 a.m. and you hear a weird noise and you're just like delusional because you're tired and you've been looking at the same thing for, I don't know, like 5 hours. So there were some things that made it exciting, but overall it wasn't too crazy. But besides the post, we did have to do like security whenever the nuclear missiles were being moved to the submarines or vice versa. So we did have to do security for that. So basically on our off week, when we weren't on post or in the wire, we would have to help and pull security. And it wasn't too long. It was normally a few hours. But yeah, the trucks that move the nuclear weapons are pretty slow. So you're basically just walking alongside, clearing out everything, just making sure that there's no crazy threats or anything. And I just remember one time I was doing a sweep and I was kicking up the grass, and this was like summer in Georgia. So there was about 1 million mosquitoes in this small area of Georgia. So as I'm walking through the grass, I'm kicking up all these mosquitoes, and it's just constantly like mosquitoes like this big, just constantly biting me on my neck and my face. And by the time we got done sweeping alongside the truck and the missile, my whole face and neck were just swollen. So there's a lot of things that I remember being on that submarine base where I was just like, yeah, that was super miserable, or like, yeah, that could have gone really bad. Because again, people just get bored and they mess around a lot when they're on post, and you hear some pretty crazy stories. There was one point, it wasn't my unit, but it was another company where somebody went on a patrol and they came back and they didn't clear their weapon out, and they were doing like drills, but they ended up actually shooting their weapon, or, you know, a negligent discharge into their buddy. He ended up living, but it's just stuff like that happens all the time. So you're constantly fighting the complacency and the boredom. And yeah, you get some pretty awesome, pretty hilarious stories from that. I mean, I could talk to any one of my buddies, and I'm sure they would have a handful of stories that a lot of people shouldn't actually hear online. But yeah, you hear some pretty crazy stories, and it's always fun to sort of, you know, get together and talk about all that crazy stuff. But yeah, I did the normal guard force for about a year, so a pretty decent amount of time. You can see a lot of crazy stuff and hear a lot of crazy stories in a year's time frame. But after about a year, I tried out for the CQB team, so it was probably 7 month process before me actually trying out for the CQB team before I actually got on the team. And yeah, that was a whole process because you have to do like a selection called a spin up. You have to go to CQB school, which is 7 weeks, and then you have to go and do another. It's called on the job training, which is basically when you just get like messed with and you have to learn all these tactics and all these procedures. So it was pretty stressful. 7 months, roughly 7 months, and then I got onto the recapture tactics team, and I was on that for a few months until I left in 2015. And yeah, it was way better experience being on the recapture tactics team because I didn't have to go on post because we were purely reactionary. So we spent a lot of times just chilling, bonding together, doing some grilling, playing some games. So we would chill out all the time. So we got to be a pretty close knit unit. We went to the gym a lot. We ran a lot, and then aside from that, we were just running new recruits through the spin up or the selection process to get more people on the team.
Ready! Attack down! Attack down! Attack up! Attack up!
So being on the recapture tactics team was way more chill, and I didn't have to do security or go on a post when I was on that team, which was way nicer. That's when I really started getting into lifting, which is yeah, it was good. I'm glad I got into lifting because I was really skinny before I got onto the recapture tactics team. But yeah, it was awesome. I'm glad that I made that transition, and it definitely changed my experience and my time being on that nuclear submarine base. And we got to go a lot more in depth with the the missiles and all the crazy facilities, just because we were the ones to go and clear all these buildings out. So we have to remember basically the entire layout by memory. And there's a lot of buildings, and they're also very big, and they have a lot of levels. So yeah, I can't really go too in depth on that, but yeah, there's a lot of crazy stuff that you have to be responsible for. And it was really cool, and it was really rewarding. I'd say guarding the nukes in general felt pretty rewarding, but sometimes it just got super bland and boring. So I'm glad I made that switch because it was awesome. And again, way more rewarding than it was being on the guard post. But honestly, I could talk about it for, hours and hours and hours. And especially if I get together with my friends, we can start remembering a lot of other crazy stories. But yeah, I won't go too in depth. But yeah, being on a nuclear submarine base was an awesome experience. Again, in hindsight, it's definitely more rewarding than it felt at the time because, again, when I was doing the normal guard post, it felt pretty boring, very monotonous. I didn't really know what was going on, and it wasn't exactly what I pictured my military career as initially. So it was hard to appreciate it during my time there. But now, yeah, it was awesome. It was a lot of fun, super chill, and just an awesome installation to be on. Again, so close to Florida. We were able to go down there all the time. I was able to get a car. I got my driver's license while I was there. So yeah, I have some really solid memories. I met a lot of friends there, made a lot of friends, and yeah. So yeah, I guess I'm just being super nostalgic, but yeah, if you guys have been on any sort of security detail or anything similar, maybe if you've been stationed there, definitely let me know what your experiences were. If you have any crazy stories, again, with any guard posts or any assignments in the military, if you have any crazy stories or anything similar, feel free to share that in the comments section, because we all have times in our military careers where we had a certain assignment and we think very fondly of it for certain reasons, whether it be the people or the experiences or just the location. You always have something that comes to mind, and I think being on that submarine base was definitely something that I think fondly of and I'm very nostalgic with. And I don't know if I'm going to find anything that felt the same as that did. But yeah, if you guys have anything similar, anything to compare it to, put that down in the comments section. Let me know how it was for you. Let me know how you think about it now. And yeah, let me know what you think about it regardless. It is a weird thing for people to hear, especially civilians, how all these Marines are just going crazy on this submarine base. And again, I can get some crazy stories, but I won't go too in depth. But yeah, let me know what you guys think regardless. I hope you enjoyed this story time. Feel free to recommend any other story times. If you want to hear about anything specifically, any other stories while I was on the submarine base or on the recapture tactics team, you can feel free to recommend that below. But yeah, I'm open for anything. I have a lot of stories. Some of them are interesting, some of them aren't as interesting, and some of them I probably just wouldn't put on YouTube. But yeah, let me know what you guys think regardless. I'm always open for any recommendations. And of course, thank you guys for liking and commenting and subscribing. I appreciate the support, especially with these storytime videos. I really appreciate the support from y'all. So definitely keep that coming, and definitely feel free to keep those recommendations coming. But again, hope you guys enjoyed the video. That is it for this one. So I will see y'all in the next one.